Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Before we start, I need to tell you something. 3 of the people whose stories you're about to hear, they made me promise I would never reveal their real locations. One of them is still being monitored by federal agents. Another one disappeared 2 months after giving me their testimony. Tonight, we're diving into 6 most disturbing true Alaskan native legend horror stories. And I'm not talking about old folklore or campfire tales. I'm talking about things that happened in the last few years to normal people in modern America. Here's what the government doesn't want you to know. Those Native Alaskan legends your teacher said were just myths, they're real. And they've adapted. They know how to use our technology now, our systems, even our laws. Imagine doing your normal job when you realize something is terribly wrong. But by the time you figure it out, it's already too late. You're already part of it. The native elders tried to warn us for centuries. We called them superstitious. We called them primitive. We were wrong. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit subscribe now, because this channel goes where others are afraid to go. Fair warning though, after tonight, you'll never look at Alaska the same way again. Now let's begin with story number 1. My name is Jenny Martinez, and I've been a 911 emergency dispatcher for Alaska State Communications for 12 years. I started this job right out of college, thinking I'd help people for a couple years before moving on to something else. But there's something about being the voice in the dark when someone's world falls apart that keeps you here. I've handled everything: car crashes and blizzards, heart attacks in remote cabins, bear attacks, avalanches, and domestic violence calls that still wake me up at night. I earned my emergency medical dispatch certification in 2015 and my crisis communication specialist license in 2018. I've talked suicidal callers off bridges, guided untrained people through CPR while paramedics raced across frozen highways, and coordinated search and rescue operations in conditions that would kill most people in minutes. My supervisor always said I had the calmest voice in the building, that I could make anyone feel safe just by talking to them. But what happened on November 15th, 2023, during my night shift at the Fairbanks Emergency Communications Center, changed everything I thought I knew about helping people. That night, I learned that sometimes being the lifeline between someone and safety means you become the bridge for something else entirely. Something that's been waiting in the wilderness for centuries, feeding on human desperation and the very connection that's supposed to save lives. I still work dispatch, but I've never been the same. And after what happened to Mike Rodriguez and Carlos Valdez, I never will be. ***, Section 2, Professional Context and Setup ***. The Fairbanks Emergency Communications Center sits in a concrete building on Airport Way, windowless except for the main entrance. Inside, it's all blue carpet, fluorescent lights that hum constantly, and workstations arranged in a horseshoe pattern around 3 huge monitors showing weather radar, trooper locations, and emergency vehicle status across the entire state. The coffee machine hasn't worked right in 5 years, but we keep using it because the bitter, metallic taste keeps you awake during those long midnight hours. Each dispatcher sits at a workstation with 4 monitors, 2 keyboards, and enough buttons and switches to fly a plane. We've got the CAD system, computer-aided dispatch, every call, that tracks every call, every unit, every response time down to the second. Radio controls for state troopers, local police, fire departments, EMS, and search and rescue. Phone systems that can conference calls, record everything, and patch through to anywhere in North America. GPS tracking for every emergency vehicle, weather monitoring, and direct lines to hospitals, poison control, and federal agencies. November 15th was a Tuesday night, and I was working the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's usually the quietest shift, just a few drunk driving calls, maybe a domestic dispute, sometimes a medical emergency at one of the remote stations along the pipeline. Alaska's a big state with not many people, so most nights you spend more time doing paperwork than talking on the radio. I was alone in the center that night. Budget cuts meant we only staffed 1 dispatcher overnight unless there was active severe weather or a major incident. My supervisor, Sergeant Davis, was at home but on call. The backup dispatcher, Maria, was sick with the flu that had been going around. So it was just me, the humming lights, that broken coffee machine, and the quiet static from a dozen different radio channels. The weather was clear for November, -20 outside, no wind, stars so bright they hurt to look at. Perfect hunting weather, according to my brother who lives for deer season. Clear skies meant good radio propagation, reliable cell towers, and no interference on our communication systems. Everything was working perfectly that night. All our equipment was green status, all our links to remote towers solid. I'd handled 3 calls since starting my shift. A fender bender on the Steese Highway with no injuries, a noise complaint at a trailer park, and a medical assist for an elderly man having chest pains in Delta Junction. Routine stuff. I was halfway through updating case files when my primary line rang at exactly 11:47 p.m. *** section 3. First anomaly, ** 911, what's your emergency? I said in my standard greeting, finger poised over the CAD keyboard to create a new incident. The voice that answered was male, mid-30s maybe, speaking in a strained whisper that made me immediately increase my headset volume. I need help, please. Something happened to my friend. Sir, I need you to speak up if you can. What's your location? I was already typing, creating incident number 231115294 inches the system. We're hunting, about 40 miles northeast of Fairbanks. I don't know the exact address, but I can give you GPS coordinates. His voice was steadier now, but still quiet. My name is Mike Rodriguez. I'm calling about my hunting partner. I pulled up our GPS interface. Go ahead with those coordinates, Mike. 64.984, 7 degrees north, 148.215, 6 degrees west. He rattled them off like he'd been staring at his GPS for hours. We're in a hunting cabin. It belongs to my friend Carlos Valdez. I entered the coordinates and watched the map zoom in on a remote area northeast of the city. Thick forest marked with a few hunting cabins and no roads within miles. I've got your location, Mike. What's the nature of your emergency? There was a pause long enough that I thought we'd lost connection. Mike, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. His breathing sounded wrong, too fast, like he'd been running. Carlos was killed about 3 hours ago, I think. I'm not sure about the time anymore. My fingers flew over the CAD system, marking the incident as a potential homicide and triggering automatic notifications to state troopers. Mike, I need you to tell me what happened. Are you injured? Are you in immediate danger? I don't know. I think so. Maybe. He was whispering again. It wasn't human, what killed him. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't human. This wasn't the first time I'd heard someone claim an animal attack was something supernatural. Black bears, brown bears, even wolves could do things to human bodies that looked impossible. Mike, what type of animal are we talking about? Bear? Wolf pack? No. Listen to me. Carlos went outside to take a piss around 8:30. I heard him walking around the cabin, looking for a good spot. Then he started screaming. Mike's voice cracked. I've never heard anyone scream like that. It went on for maybe 30 seconds. Then just stopped. Complete silence. I was typing notes while pulling up our state trooper locations. The nearest unit was Trooper Williams, about 4 hours away by vehicle. 2 hours by helicopter, if we could get flight operations to approve it. Did you go outside to check on him? I called his name for 10 minutes. Nothing. I was scared to open the door, but I couldn't just leave him out there. Mike paused. So, I opened the door and called for him again. That's when I heard him answer. What did he say? He said he was fine. Said he'd be right back to the fire. Mike's voice got even quieter, but the voice came from the wrong direction. Carlos went west to piss, but the voice came from the east, from deeper in the forest. I was already setting up a conference call with Trooper Williams and putting in a request for helicopter support. Mike, I'm coordinating rescue units now. State troopers are en route. Can you stay on the line with me? Yeah, I can do that. He sounded a little relieved. But there's more. About 20 minutes after I heard him call out, Carlos came back to the fire. That's good, right? He's okay? No. Mike's voice went dead, flat. Something's wrong with him. He's moving wrong. His arms bend backwards at the elbows. And he won't talk to me, just sits there staring at the fire. Section 4. Escalating wrongness. ***. I'd been a dispatcher long enough to know that shock and hypothermia could make people see things that weren't there, make them confused about what was happening. But Mike's voice was clear, his speech patterns normal except for the fear. This wasn't someone hallucinating from cold or trauma. "Mike, I need you to describe exactly what you're seeing right now." He's sitting across from me by the fire pit, but he won't look at me. He just stares into the flames, and every few minutes he takes something from a pile next to him and eats it. Mike's breathing was getting faster. Raw. Whatever he's eating, it's raw. I muted my headset and keyed my radio to Trooper Williams. Unit 47. ETA to coordinates 64.9847 north, 148.2156 west. Dispatch. Unit 47. Road conditions are deteriorating. Estimate 4 hours minimum, possibly longer if I hit ice. I unmuted the phone. "Mike, help is coming. I need you to stay calm and keep talking to me. Is Carlos responding to you at all?" I tried talking to him. Asked if he was hurt, if he needed me to call for help. He didn't even look up. Mike paused. Then he started making sounds while he ate. Wet sounds. Like tearing meat. My stomach turned. I'd handled enough hunting accident calls to know what that meant. "Mike, I'm going to patch in my supervisor and a medical professional. Don't hang up." I activated our conference system and speed-dialed Sergeant Davis at home. He answered on the second ring, alert despite being woken up. "Davis here." "Sergeant, I've got a situation at hunting coordinates 64.9847 north, 148.2156 west. Possible fatality. Caller reports his hunting partner is acting strangely, possibly injured or in shock. Requesting guidance. Are troopers en route?" Unit 47, 4 hours out. I'm considering helicopter support. Approved. Patch me in with the caller. I brought Davis into the call. "Mike, this is Sergeant Davis, my supervisor. He's going to help coordinate your rescue." "Thank you," Mike said. "But I found something." When Carlos came back to the fire, I noticed blood on his hands and face. So I got my flashlight and looked around the cabin. "What did you find?" Davis asked. "Pieces of our guide, Jimmy Yazzie. We hired him yesterday in Fairbanks." Mike's voice started shaking again, his jacket torn up and bloody, his rifle snapped in half. And other pieces, scattered around the fire pit, like someone was feeding them to the flames. Davis keyed his radio privately while staying on the phone. I heard him order helicopter support and request additional trooper units. This was escalating beyond a simple rescue. "Mike, where exactly is Carlos now?" I asked. "Still by the fire. Still eating. But now he's looking at me." Mike whispered so quietly I had to strain to hear. His eyes reflect the light like an animal's. And when he opens his mouth, I can see too many teeth. I was reaching for our medical emergency protocols when the most disturbing sound I'd ever heard came through the phone. Scratching. Long, deliberate scratches against wood, like claws dragging across the cabin wall. "Mike, what was that sound?" "He's outside. Carlos is walking around the cabin, scratching the walls." Mike's breathing was ragged now, but he's still sitting by the fire. I can see him. He's in 2 places at once. Davis immediately activated our psychological crisis protocol. "Jenny, patch in Dr. Kim. Now." Dr. Sarah Kim was our contracted trauma counselor, on call for situations involving extreme psychological stress. I speed-dialed her emergency line. "Dr. Kim, emergency conference. Caller is experiencing what appears to be a severe psychological episode." "I'm here," Dr. Kim said, her voice professional and calm. "Mike, this is Dr. Kim. I need you to focus on my voice. You're experiencing extreme stress, and your mind might be playing tricks on you." "I'm not crazy," Mike said. "The scratching is in rhythm. 4 scratches, pause, 4 scratches, pause, over and over, like music." I could hear it through the phone now. The rhythmic scratching was clear and deliberate, definitely not random animal behavior. "Mike, Doctor," Kim continued, "I need you to move away from any windows and get to the most secure part of the cabin. I can't move. If I move, he'll know I know." Mike's whisper was barely audible. "He's calling my name now." We all went silent, listening. Through the phone came a voice calling, "Mike, Mike." But it sounded wrong. Too many voices speaking at once, layered over each other like a recording played through multiple speakers. "Jesus," Davis muttered. Dr. Kim's voice cut through the silence. "Jenny, I need you to look up case files from the 1980 seconds. Search for Wendigo or Wendigo. Cross-reference with the Fairbanks area." I was already typing, accessing our archived records. "Why? What are you thinking?" "I've seen this pattern before. Multiple identity manifestation, cannibalistic behavior, vocal mimicry, impossible physical presence. It matches historical reports." The search returned 6 case files from 1982 through 1987. All involved hunters or trappers in remote areas. All included reports of missing persons who were later seen by witnesses after their deaths were confirmed. All were closed as hypothermia-induced hallucinations or hoaxes. "Dr. Kim," I said, reading from the screen. "All these cases were debunked. Were they? Or were they just too impossible to accept?" Her voice carried a weight I'd never heard from her before. "Mike, listen to me very carefully. Do not go outside. Do not let whatever is pretending to be Carlos into the cabin." Through the phone, we heard Mike's stomach growling, loud, painful-sounding hunger pangs. "When's the last time you ate, Mike?" Dr. Kim asked. 3 days ago. We were going to cook something tonight, but..." His voice trailed off. "I'm so hungry. Carlos looks so peaceful now. He's not hungry anymore." I felt my own stomach cramp suddenly, a gnawing emptiness that made me double over at my workstation. I hadn't eaten since lunch, but this was different. This was desperate, painful hunger that made my mouth water. "Jenny?" Davis's voice sounded distant. "You okay?" I couldn't answer. I was staring at Mike's case file on my screen, but instead of seeing text, I was seeing food. Hot meals, fresh meat, anything to fill the growing void in my stomach. The hunger was spreading through me like poison, and with it came an overwhelming urge to help Mike do what he needed to do. "Mike," I heard myself saying, "maybe Carlos has the right idea. Maybe you should just..." "Jenny." "Doctor." Kim's voice cut through my thoughts like a slap. "Hang up the phone. Now." The Wendigo spreads through sympathy, through connection. But I couldn't hang up. My hand wouldn't move. All I could think about was the hunger, Mike's hunger, and how easy it would be for him to just take one small bite. Section 5, Confrontation and Climax. The scratching on the cabin walls had stopped. Through the phone, we could hear Mike's labored breathing and the distant crackling of the fire. Then came a new sound, metal sliding against metal. "He's unbolting the door," Mike whispered. I locked it when this started, but now I'm opening it. "Mike, no," I screamed, but even as I said it, I wanted him to open that door. The hunger was consuming me, making every rational thought feel like fighting against gravity. "I can't stop myself," Mike said, his voice getting further from the phone. "The hunger is too strong. Carlos understands. Carlos can help." Dr. Kim was shouting commands at me, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Davis was on the radio calling for immediate helicopter deployment, but all I could focus on was Mike and the relief that was waiting for him just outside that door. Through the phone came the sound of heavy wooden bolts sliding back, one by one, an old cabin door opening with a creak that seemed to go on forever. Then silence that stretched for 30 seconds. "Mike?" I called softly. "Mike, are you there?" When the answer came, it wasn't Mike's voice. It was two voices speaking in perfect unison. Mike and Carlos, but somehow wrong. Wet sounds accompanied their words, like they were talking through mouths full of food. "Thank you, Jenny," they said together. "We're so full now, so satisfied. The hunger is gone." The wet chewing sounds that followed made me vomit into my wastebasket. But even as I retched, part of me was glad for Mike. He wasn't hungry anymore. The problem was solved. Dr. Kim was screaming at me to disconnect the call, but I couldn't reach for the button. Not until she physically ran into the dispatch center 20 minutes later and ripped the headset from my ears. The connection went dead, and with it, the hunger that had been consuming me. Section 6, Resolution and Aftermath. The helicopter reached the coordinates at 3:17 a.m. The search team found the cabin exactly where Mike had described it, GPS coordinates perfect. The door was standing wide open. Inside, they found 2 cell phones, both still connected to 911. One was Mike's, the other belonged to Carlos Valdez. They found no bodies, they found no blood. They found no sign of struggle or violence. What they did find was my business card, the one I'd given to a group of hunters at a safety seminar 6 months earlier. It was sitting on the cabin's wooden table, covered in tooth marks. Human tooth marks, according to the forensics report, but showing patterns of pressure that were biomechanically impossible for human jaw structure. The official report listed Mike Rodriguez and Carlos Valdez as missing persons, presumed dead due to exposure. The case was closed after a month-long investigation that found no evidence of foul play. The recording of our phone call was classified as part of an ongoing psychological study into stress-induced hallucinations. But Dr. Kim knew better. She pulled those 1,980 seconds case files and found the pattern. Every 20 to 30 years, in remote areas of Alaska, hunters would call 911 reporting the death and subsequent return of their companions. Every case involved reports of impossible hunger, cannibalistic behavior, and multiple identity manifestation. Every case ended with missing persons who were never found. I was placed on administrative leave for 2 weeks and required to undergo psychological evaluation before returning to duty. The official explanation for my behavior during the call was sympathetic stress response, HST. Basically, that I'd become so emotionally invested in Mike's situation that I'd temporarily lost objectivity. I'm back at work now, same shift, same workstation. But I requested that my business cards be destroyed. I don't do safety seminars anymore, and I've developed a protocol that no one else knows about. If I ever get a call from hunters in remote areas reporting strange behavior from their companions, if they mention impossible hunger or voices that don't match the speakers, I hang up immediately. I don't care about protocols or procedures. I don't care about my job or helping people. Because I learned that night that some things spread through the very connections we use to save lives. Some hungers are contagious, traveling through phone lines and radio waves, finding new hosts in the people who care enough to listen. Mike Rodriguez and Carlos Valdez were never found, but last month we received a call from a hunting cabin in the same area. Different hunters, different names, same GPS coordinates, same. The story about a friend who died and came back wrong. I hung up on that call too. Sometimes the only way to help people is to refuse to listen to them. Sometimes the lifeline becomes the bridge for something that's been waiting in the wilderness for centuries, something that knows that the people most likely to help are the ones most vulnerable to its influence. I still work dispatch. I still answer 911 calls. But I've learned that not every emergency deserves a response, and not every voice asking for help is human. The Wendigo is patient. It can wait, and it knows that there will always be people like me, people whose job it is to care about strangers in distress. It's counting on it. My name is Maria Santos Chen, and I've been working as a social media coordinator for the Haynesboro School District for 8 years. I started this job right after Maya was born, thinking it would be perfect, steady hours, summers off, and I could document all the school events that my daughter would eventually be part of. I've live-streamed over 200 school events, from basketball games to science fairs, and I pride myself on never missing a moment that matters to our families. I know every parent in our small Alaska town of Haines. I know which angles make the gym look bigger, how to adjust for the terrible auditorium lighting, and exactly when to zoom in for those perfect graduation cap toss shots. I've helped families stay connected to their kids' school lives, especially our military families stationed elsewhere and grandparents in the lower 48 who can't make the trip up here. But what happened during Maya's graduation ceremony on June 8, 2024, changed everything I thought I knew about my own daughter and about the things that live in the waters around our town. The Facebook live stream I started that morning to share my baby girl's big moment ended up documenting something that no parent should ever have to see. And the worst part? Over 1,200 people watched it happen in real time, and nobody could help me. The Haines High School graduation ceremony always takes place in our small gymnasium. It's not much to look at. Standard bleachers on both sides, a wooden stage that creaks when you walk on it, and fluorescent lights that buzz if you listen close enough. But on graduation day, we transform it. We hang up the blue and gold banners, set up the folding chairs in perfect rows, and position the podium just right so the live stream camera catches everything. I'd been planning Maya's graduation stream for months. As the district's social media coordinator, I had access to the good equipment, the HD camera with the stabilizer, the wireless microphone system, and the laptop setup that could handle a smooth Facebook Live broadcast. I'd done dozens of these streams, and I knew exactly how to frame the shot so parents watching from anywhere in the world would feel like they were sitting right there in the front row. That morning started perfectly normal. I arrived at 6 a.m. to set up the equipment and test the internet connection. The bandwidth in Haines can be tricky, especially when we're expecting a big online audience, but everything was running smooth. I had Maya's grandmother, Abuela Santos, helping me arrange the flowers on the stage while she told me for the 100th time how proud she was of her granddaughter. Maya had been my little shadow at these events for years. She knew the routine better than most of my adult volunteers. She'd help me adjust camera angles, remind me when the battery light was blinking, and always made sure I had the right angle for the family photos afterwards. This was supposed to be her day, her moment to walk across that stage and officially become a high school graduate. The weather was typical Southeast Alaska, dodgy, cloudy, and damp, with that thick marine layer that makes everything feel close and quiet. The temperature had dropped overnight, unusual for June, and I remember having to turn up the heat in the gym because families were commenting about how cold it was. I figured it was just one of those weird weather days we get sometimes. By 9 a.m., families were filling the bleachers. Maya was backstage with her class, wearing the dress we'd picked out together 3 months ago. A simple navy blue dress that brought out her eyes, with the silver necklace her dad and I gave her for her 18th birthday. She looked beautiful and nervous, exactly like a graduate should look. I started the Facebook live stream at 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony began. The viewer count started climbing immediately, 47 viewers, then 89, then 156. Parents, relatives, family friends, and even some of Maya's old teachers who'd moved away were tuning in. I felt that familiar, warm feeling I always got when I could help bring families together, even across thousands of miles. Everything went normal for the first 20 minutes. Principal Morrison gave his opening remarks, the valedictorian made her speech, and I panned the camera across the graduating class, sitting in their neat rows. Maya was in the third row, exactly where she was supposed to be. She caught my eye and gave me a little wave, and I zoomed in just enough to capture it. The comments were flowing with heart emojis and congratulations. Then I noticed something strange in the viewfinder. When I zoomed back out to show the full class, Maya looked different. Not dramatically different, but something was off. She was sitting up straighter than usual. Maya had injured her back in soccer last year and always slouched a little to the left to avoid pain. But in the camera, she was sitting perfectly straight, like a soldier at attention. I adjusted the focus, thinking maybe the lens was playing tricks on me. But when the image cleared, I saw what had been bothering me. Maya looked taller. Not just sitting straighter, but actually taller. Maya is 5'4". I know this because we measured her against the kitchen doorframe every birthday. But in the viewfinder, she seemed to tower over the students around her, even while sitting down. The comments started to notice too. Roberto Chen, my husband Roberto, typed, "When did Maya get so tall? She was 5'4" yesterday." I laughed it off at first and replied that it was probably just the camera angle. But then I looked over at the actual graduating class, not through the camera, and Maya looked normal. It was only in the live stream that she appeared different. Miss Rodriguez, Maya's homeroom teacher, commented, "Maya's been acting strange all week, very quiet, staring at nothing." That was news to me. Maya had seemed fine at home, maybe a little nervous about graduation, but nothing unusual. I made a mental note to ask her about it later. The ceremony continued with the scholarship announcements. When they called Maya's name for the Academic Achievement Award, she stood up to walk to the stage. That's when I noticed her walk was different. Maya had been limping slightly since her soccer injury last year. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny favoring of her left leg that only family would notice. But walking to the stage, her gait was perfectly even. She moved like someone who'd never been injured. Uncle Carlos, Roberto's brother, noticed it too. His comment popped up, "That's not Maya's walk." She limps from that soccer injury last year. I tried to get a better angle with the camera, but every time I focused on Maya, the image seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. When Maya reached the podium to accept her award, she looked directly into the camera. Her eyes, which had always been a warm brown, looked completely black. Not just dark brown, black, like looking into deep water at night. "Classmate," Jenny commented. "Oh my God, Maya's eyes look completely black in this lighting." I tried to adjust the camera settings, thinking it was a lighting issue. The gymnasium fluorescents were old and sometimes cast weird shadows, but when I looked over at Maya with my own eyes, not through the camera, her eyes looked normal. It was only in the live stream that they appeared completely black. After Maya returned to her seat with her award, the technical problems started. The live stream kept buffering, even though my internet connection was showing full strength. Comments from viewers started coming in about audio issues. They were hearing static whenever the camera focused on Maya, but clear audio for everyone else. Concerned viewer, 42, someone I didn't recognize, commented, "Is she floating? Her feet don't seem to touch the ground." I thought that was ridiculous, until I zoomed in on Maya's feet. In the viewfinder, there was a small but distinct gap between her shoes and the floor, like she was hovering just slightly above her chair. I tried switching to my backup camera, thinking the main one was malfunctioning. But the backup camera showed the same thing. Maya, sitting unnaturally straight, eyes black in the viewfinder, appearing to float slightly above her seat. Meanwhile, looking at her directly without the camera, she looked completely normal. Abuela Santos tugged on my sleeve. "Mija, something's wrong with Maya. She won't look at our family section." I glanced over at Maya, and Abuela was right. Maya's head was turned toward the camera, toward me, but her eyes never moved to where our family was sitting. Not once. It was like she couldn't see us, or didn't want to. The viewer count kept climbing, 847 viewers, then 1,043, then 1,247. Word was spreading beyond our usual graduation audience. People were sharing the stream, and comments were coming in from strangers asking about the weird girl in the third row. When Principal Morrison began calling names for diploma presentation, I noticed the other graduates were starting to move away from Maya. It was subtle at first, just a little more space between chairs than usual. But as the ceremony went on, it became obvious. There was now a clear gap around Maya, like the other students were unconsciously avoiding her. Local, elder, Joseph. I recognized him as Joseph Kahak, one of the respected Tlingit elders in town, commented. "She's been taken by Kushta Ka. I've seen this at life transitions before." I didn't know what that meant, but something about his comment made my stomach clench with fear. Roberto's messages were getting more frantic. "That is not my daughter. Maya has a birthmark on her neck. It's gone." I zoomed in on Maya's neck. Roberto was right. The small strawberry birthmark that Maya had had since birth, just below her left ear, was gone. Her neck was completely clear. That's when Maya turned and looked directly at the camera again. But this time, she smiled. It wasn't Maya's smile. Maya had always been self-conscious about her slightly crooked front tooth and kept her smile small and closed-lipped. This smile was wide, showing perfect straight white teeth. And it went on too long. Way too long. The comments exploded. "Mom, Maria, S. She just looked directly at the camera with someone else's smile." "Teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, that's not Maya's smile. Maya never shows her teeth." Panicked, parent Lisa. Other graduates are backing away from her in terror. I looked around the gymnasium with my own eyes, not through the camera. The other graduates did look uncomfortable, but they weren't in terror. It was only in the live stream that their fear was obvious. Whatever was happening to Maya, it was stronger in the digital world than in real life. When they called Maya Santos Chen for diploma presentation, she stood up. The live stream immediately started glitching. The image pixelated, the audio cut out in bursts, and several viewers commented that their browsers were crashing when they tried to focus on her. As Maya walked toward the stage, every step was perfectly measured and unnaturally graceful. She moved like she was walking on air. When she reached Principal Morrison, instead of shaking his hand and taking her diploma like every other graduate, she stopped and spoke. But the words that came out weren't English or Spanish. They weren't any language I'd ever heard. The syllables were long and flowing, almost like singing, but with an underneath coldness that made everyone in the gymnasium stop and stare. Joseph Kahak's comment came through immediately. Ancient Tlingit death songs. She's speaking words of the land otter spirits. Principal Morrison looked confused and nervous. He held out the diploma, trying to keep the ceremony moving, but Maya just kept speaking in that strange, flowing language. The words seemed to echo in the gymnasium, even though there was no PA system near her. The live stream was going crazy. The viewer count jumped to 1,847 as people shared the stream with their friends, but the video kept cutting out every few seconds. Comments were flooding in faster than I could read them, mostly from strangers asking what was happening and if this was some kind of performance art. Then Maya stopped speaking the strange language and switched to perfect English. Her voice was Maya's voice, but the words were wrong. She looked directly into the camera and said, "Maya is gone now," and then she laughed. It was a sound that no 18-year-old girl should ever make. Old and knowing, and completely without warmth. The entire gymnasium went silent. Even the parents stopped whispering to each other. Maya took her diploma from Principal Morrison's shaking hand, walked off the stage, and headed straight for the exit. Not back to her seat with the other graduates, but out of the building entirely. I tried to follow her with the camera, but every time I focused on her, the stream cut out completely. The signal would return only when I pointed the camera away from her. By the time I managed to get a clear shot of the exit, Maya was gone. The ceremony completely fell apart after that. Principal Morrison tried to continue calling names, but parents were getting up from their seats, checking their phones, and asking each other what had just happened. The remaining graduates looked scared and confused. Some were crying. I left the camera running and pushed through the crowd to get outside. I had to find Maya. The parking lot was full of families taking pictures and congratulating their graduates, but I didn't see Maya anywhere. Roberto was already outside, frantically calling her phone. "She's not answering," he said, his voice tight with panic. "I've tried 10 times. It goes straight to voicemail." We split up to search the school grounds. I went toward the back of the building, where Maya used to sit during lunch breaks. That's where I found her graduation dress. It was folded neatly on a bench near the tree line, like someone had carefully removed it and laid it out. But there was no sign of Maya. The strangest part was how the dress was positioned. It wasn't crumpled or thrown down like someone had changed clothes quickly. It was arranged almost ceremonially, with the sleeves spread out and the fabric smoothed flat. Next to it was the silver necklace we'd given her, also carefully placed. I called Roberto over, and we both stared at the empty dress. Neither of us wanted to say what we were thinking, that it looked like Maya had simply vanished from inside her clothes. Roberto called the police while I went back to check on the live stream. The comments section was chaos. Over 2,000 people were now watching, most of them strangers who'd heard about the weird graduation video on social media. Some were treating it like entertainment, making jokes about the creepy girl. Others were asking genuine questions about what they'd witnessed. But the comment that stopped me cold was from Joseph Kahak. Land otter spirits don't like being recorded. They steal souls at transitions. Graduation is a threshold, a time when young people become adults. The spirits feed on that transformation. I tried messaging him directly through Facebook, but he didn't respond. Instead, he posted another public comment. The spirits return their victims after 7 years, but they're never the same. The body might come back, but the soul stays with the land otters in the underwater villages. The police arrived within 20 minutes, but what could they do? An 18-year-old had left her own graduation ceremony and wasn't answering her phone. Technically, she was an adult and free to go wherever she wanted. They took a report and said they'd keep an eye out for her. But I could tell they thought she'd just gotten overwhelmed and run off. But I knew my daughter, Maya, wouldn't have left without her dress, without her necklace, without saying goodbye. Maya wouldn't have spoken in ancient languages or smiled with teeth that weren't hers. Whatever had walked out of that gymnasium wasn't my daughter. The search continued for 3 days. We found footprints leading from the bench toward Chilkoot Inlet, the body of water that borders our town. The prints were Maya's size and from her graduation shoes, but they were spaced too far apart, like someone with much longer legs had been wearing them. The footprints led right to the water's edge and then simply stopped. Not like someone had walked into the water and the prints had been washed away by waves. They just ended, as if Maya had walked to the edge of the inlet and then disappeared into the air. That was 6 months ago. Maya Chen is still officially listed as a missing person, but the investigation has gone cold. The police think she's a runaway who doesn't want to be found. Her friends think she had some kind of mental breakdown from graduation stress. Most people in town have accepted that Maya is gone and probably won't be coming back. But I know better. I've watched that live stream footage hundreds of times, and every time I notice something new. The way her shadow fell wrong in the gymnasium lights. How the other graduates unconsciously moved away from her. The way the camera equipment reacted when she was in frame. Joseph Kahak found me a month after the graduation. He explained about the Kushta Ka, the land otter spirits that live in underwater villages and steal human souls. He said they're drawn to young people at transition moments, birth, coming of age, marriage, death. They replace the person with a hollow copy that can walk and talk but has no real soul. According to the stories, the spirits keep the stolen souls in their underwater villages for 7 years. After that, they might return them. But the people who come back are never the same. They're changed, distant, like they're always listening to sounds the rest of us can't hear. I still work for the school district, but I don't do live streams anymore. I can't handle pointing a camera at young people during important moments. What if I see something that isn't supposed to be there? What if I capture another soul being stolen and I'm helpless to stop it? Roberto and I hold a vigil every June 8th now. We sit by Chilkoot Inlet with Maya's favorite foods and photos from her childhood, hoping that somehow she can see us and know we're waiting. We've met other families over the months, people whose children disappeared near water, whose teenagers walked away from important life events and never came home. The Facebook video is still online. I can't bring myself to delete it, even though watching it tears me apart every time. Sometimes I get messages from people who've seen it, asking if it's real or if it was some kind of elaborate hoax. I always tell them the truth. It's real, and they should keep their children away from the water during important moments in their lives. I'm sharing this story because I need people to know what happened to Maya. Not the official version about a teenage runaway, but the truth about the things that live in the water around our town. The spirits that wait for young people at threshold moments, when they're vulnerable and changing and full of life that can be stolen. If you're watching this and you have children, pay attention during their big moments. Graduations, birthdays, first days of school, proms, any time when they're becoming someone new. Watch their eyes, listen to their voices. Make sure they cast shadows properly and their feet touch the ground. And if something seems wrong, if they're too tall or too straight, or their walk is different, or their smile isn't quite right, don't ignore it. Don't assume it's just the camera or the lighting or your imagination. Trust your instincts, because by the time you're sure something is wrong, it might already be too late. I miss my daughter every day. The real Maya, not whatever wore her face during graduation. I'll keep waiting by the water, hoping that in 7 years, some version of her might come home. But I know that even if she does return, she'll never really be my little girl again. The land otter spirits don't give back what they take. They only return echoes of the people they've stolen, and echoes can never love you the way your real child did. That's why I'm telling you this story. So maybe, if you pay attention, if you're careful during those important moments, your children won't become echoes too. My name is Rita Alvarez, and I've been a sound engineer for 12 years. I started right after college, working in small recording studios in Los Angeles, then moved up to bigger projects, movies, TV shows, even some Grammy-winning albums. I've fixed audio problems that seemed impossible, cleaned up recordings from crime scenes, and worked with equipment worth more than most people's houses. I've heard sounds that would make your skin crawl, screams from horror movies, confessions from interrogation rooms, the last words of people who didn't make it home. But what happened 3 weeks ago in Bethel, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about sound itself. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what you hear. It's when the voices you love most go completely silent. It started with a phone call from my brother Luis on a Tuesday morning. Luis drives school buses in Bethel, has for 8 years now. He's the guy every kid loves because he knows all their names and always has a joke ready. More importantly, he calls his twin daughters every single night at 7 o'clock sharp to say goodnight. It's been their routine since his divorce 3 years ago. But when Luis called me that Tuesday, something was wrong. I could hear him trying to speak, but no sound came out. Not a whisper, not even breathing. The line was completely silent except for what sounded like crying. "Luis?" I said into the phone. "Luis, are you there?" I heard the phone being set down, then picked up again. Then 3 quick taps, our old childhood code for help me. I was on a plane to Alaska 6 hours later. Bethel is a small city on the edge of nowhere, about 6,000 people surrounded by endless tundra. When you fly in, all you see is flat brown land stretching in every direction, with a river cutting through it like a scar. Luis picked me up at the tiny airport, and seeing him in person made my stomach drop. He looked like he'd aged 5 years and 3 days. His eyes were red from crying, and he kept opening his mouth like he was trying to talk, but nothing came out. I loaded my equipment into his bus, portable recording gear, spectrum analyzers, and my laptop with professional audio software. If this was some kind of medical problem, maybe I could figure out what was wrong with his vocal cords. I'd worked with voice actors who'd damaged their voices before. Usually, it was something that could be fixed. Luis drove me to the small medical clinic where he'd been going for tests. The doctor, a tired-looking woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, met us in the waiting room. "I've never seen anything like it," she said, shaking her head. "His vocal cords look perfect. No damage, no swelling, no growths. Physically, there's no reason he can't speak. But when he tries to make any sound, nothing happens. It's like his voice just isn't there anymore." She led us to an exam room where I set up my equipment. I had Luis sit in front of my best microphone, a Neumann U87 that can pick up sounds so quiet you'd think they were imaginary. "Try to say something," I told him. "Anything." Luis opened his mouth and moved his lips like he was saying my name. I watched the levels on my computer screen. Nothing. Not even the smallest blip. It was like his voice had been completely erased. "When did this start exactly?" I asked Dr. Chen. 3 days ago, Saturday morning. Luis came in saying he woke up and couldn't make any sound. But he's not the only one. She took us down the hall to another room where a young woman sat holding a baby. The woman looked exhausted, and the baby was crying. "This is Maria Santos, Dr. Chen said. She runs the bakery downtown. Same exact symptoms." I looked at Maria, and she mouthed the words, "Help me," without any sound. The baby in her arms kept crying, reaching for her face like he was waiting for her to sing to him. "How many people?" I asked. 5 so far, Dr. Chen said. "All healthy adults, all lost their voices completely overnight, and it's spreading." That's when I knew this wasn't medical. I spent the rest of that day testing everyone I could find who'd lost their voice. My equipment showed the same thing every time: perfect vocal cords, normal breathing, but absolutely no sound production. It was like their voices had been surgically removed, except there was no surgery. That evening, Luis took me to his small apartment above the hardware store. He had pictures of his daughters everywhere, Emma and Sophia, both 8 years old. He kept pointing to the phone, then to the pictures, then covering his face with his hands. I understood. 7 o'clock had come and gone, and for the first time in 3 years, he couldn't call them goodnight. I was setting up more equipment when Luis grabbed my arm and pointed out the window. It was getting dark, and at first I didn't see anything. Then I heard it, a voice calling from outside, a familiar voice. "Rita? Rita, come outside." It was my voice, my exact voice, calling from the street below. Luis went white. He grabbed my shoulders and shook his head frantically, pointing at me, then at the window. I understood what he was trying to tell me. 1, I was right here, so who was calling my name outside? I moved to the window and looked down. The street was empty, except for the orange glow of a few streetlights. But the voice kept calling. "Rita, come down here. Luis needs you." I pulled out my phone and started recording. The voice was perfect. Same tone, same accent, even the way I pronounced my R's with a slight roll. But I was standing right there, not speaking. That's when Luis started crying silently, pointing at me and then at the window. I realized what was happening. He could hear my voice calling from outside, but I was standing right next to him. The same thing that had happened to his voice was now happening to mine. "Don't worry," I whispered too. "Luis, we're going to figure this out." But as soon as I said it, I heard my own voice from outside repeat the exact same words. "Don't worry. We're going to figure this out." I connected my equipment to the window and pointed a directional microphone toward the street. My computer screen showed clear audio signatures, ISADs. Someone was definitely speaking outside using my voice. But the vocal patterns, the frequency analysis, everything matched my voice perfectly. Not a recording, not an imitation. It was like my voice was actually down there, speaking without me. The voice outside started saying things I'd never said. "Luis, remember when we were kids and you were afraid of the dark? I would sing to you until you fell asleep." That was true. I had done that many times when we were little, but I'd never told anyone about it. "Remember the song? Close your eyes, little brother, the monsters aren't real." Luis looked at me with terror in his eyes. That song was something I'd made up when we were 6 years old. No one else knew it. "Come outside, Luis, come find me." I grabbed Luis before he could move toward the door. Something was very wrong. My voice knew things it shouldn't know, was saying things I wasn't saying. But the worst part was what happened next. More voices joined mine outside. I heard Maria Santos's voice saying, "Come outside, bring the baby." Then another voice I didn't recognize. Then another. All the missing voices were down there, calling to their families. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Luis's voice, clear as day, calling from the street. "Rita, it's me. I got my voice back. Come outside so I can show you." Luis was standing right next to me, still unable to make a sound. But his voice was outside, calling for me. I connected my laptop to the internet and ran voice analysis software on everything I was recording. The results showed that every voice outside matched the vocal patterns of the people who'd lost their voices. These weren't recordings or computer-generated sounds. According to my equipment, these were the actual voices of Luis, Maria, and the others. Except their voices were outside, and they were inside, voiceless. That night I called the tribal council. Bethel sits in the traditional territory of the Yupik people, and I figured they might know something about what was happening. An elder named Joe Kanguk agreed to meet me the next morning. Joe was in his 70s, with deep lines around his eyes and hands that never stopped moving. When I explained what was happening, he nodded like he'd been expecting this. "Chimik Suli," he said quietly. "The sound thief." My grandmother told me stories, but I hoped they were just stories. He explained that Chimik Suli was an ancient being that fed on human voices to gain knowledge and power. It would take voices from people while they slept, leaving them silent. But the voices didn't disappear. The creature kept them, used them to learn secrets and lure family members. "It's getting stronger," Joe said. "First, it takes one voice, learns from it. Then it takes more. Each voice it steals teaches it about the person, their family, their secrets. It uses those voices to hunt." "How do we stop it?" I asked. Joe looked sad. "In the old stories, only one way. Someone has to trade their voice willingly. But once you give your voice to Chimik Suli, you never get it back." I spent that day recording everything, the voices outside, the analysis results, interviews with the families. As a sound engineer, I was used to problems having technical solutions. But this was beyond technology. That evening, the voices outside got worse. I could hear Luis's voice telling stories about our childhood that only he would know. Maria's voice was singing lullabies in Spanish to her crying baby. But the families inside couldn't respond. They could only listen to their stolen voices calling from the darkness. Around midnight, I heard something new. Luis's voice outside started calling for his daughters. "Emma, Sophia, it's Daddy. I need you to come outside." I realized with horror that if Emma and Sophia were here, they would hear their father's voice calling and want to go to him. The creature was using the stolen voices to hunt for more victims. "Luis," his own voice called from outside. "Bring Rita, I want to talk to my sister." That's when I understood. The creature didn't just want voices, it wanted knowledge. As a sound engineer, I knew things about audio technology, recording equipment, communication systems. If it took my voice, it would learn everything I knew about sound. But Luis was my brother. I couldn't watch him suffer like this. I set up my recording equipment one more time and opened the window. "I can hear you," I called down to the street. "What do you want?" "Trade," came Luis's voice from below. One voice for another. "Give me yours, and your brother gets his back." "Rita, no." came my own voice from outside. Don't trust it. The creature was using my stolen voice to argue with itself, trying to confuse me. But I'd made my decision. I'm a sound engineer, I called down. I understand how voices work, how sound travels, how audio equipment functions. That's valuable knowledge, isn't it? More valuable than a bus driver's voice. Silence from outside. One trade, Luis's voice finally said. But you speak your last words into that microphone. Once your voice transfers to me, you'll never speak again. I looked at Luis, who was shaking his head frantically. But I couldn't let this thing keep his voice, couldn't let it use his voice to hurt his daughters. I positioned myself in front of my best microphone and started the recording. My name is Rita Alvarez, I said clearly. I've been a sound engineer for 12 years, and I know everything about audio, technology, recording systems, and voice analysis. I willingly trade my voice to save my brother Luis. As I spoke those last words, I felt something impossible happen. My voice started echoing, not from the speakers, but from outside the window. I could hear myself speaking the same words from the street below, even though I was still talking. Then, mid-sentence, my voice cut off completely. Luis suddenly gasped and started coughing. "Rita," he said, his voice rough but clear. "Rita, are you okay?" I tried to answer him, but nothing came out. I touched my throat, tried to whisper, tried to make any sound at all. But just like the others, my voice was gone. Luis immediately understood what had happened. He started crying and trying to hug me, saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. But I was relieved. He had his voice back. He could call Emma and Sophia goodnight again. Except now the creature had something much more dangerous than a bus driver's voice. From outside, I heard my voice speaking with knowledge I'd never shared out loud. Audio frequencies between 18 and 22 kilohertz can be used to transmit data without human detection, my voice said. Digital audio compression algorithms can hide secondary information in sound files. Radio communication systems can be hijacked using specific modulation techniques. The creature was demonstrating the technical knowledge it had gained from my voice. As a sound engineer, I knew things about surveillance, communication networks, and audio technology that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Luis called the tribal council immediately. When Joe arrived and heard my voice reciting technical specifications from outside, his face went pale. "It's learning," he said. "Every voice makes it smarter. But your voice teaches it about all the human communication systems." Over the next 3 days, things got worse. My stolen voice started appearing on radio broadcasts, speaking technical information about how to intercept communications. Phone systems in town began malfunctioning, playing recordings of my voice, explaining how to tap phone lines. The creature was using the knowledge from my voice to expand its power over all forms of human communication. Dr. Chen reported that 2 more people had lost their voices. But now, their families were hearing the voices on their phones, on the radio, sometimes coming from inside their own houses. The creature was learning to use technology to spread the stolen voices further. I wrote everything down since I couldn't speak. Luis read my notes to Joe and Dr. Chen. "We have to find a way to stop it," Luis said. "Rita sacrificed her voice to save me. I can't let this thing use her knowledge to hurt more people." But Joe shook his head. "The old stories don't tell us how to get voices back once they're given willingly. Rita made the trade. There's no way to undo it. As I write this, it's been 3 weeks since I lost my voice." Luis got his voice back and immediately called his daughters. He tells them goodnight every evening, just like before. Maria Santos got her voice back too and can sing to her baby again. But the cost was higher than any of us expected. My voice, carrying 12 years of professional audio engineering knowledge, is still out there. Sometimes I hear it on emergency radio channels, explaining how to disrupt communication systems. Sometimes it appears in recorded phone calls, teaching people how to tap into private conversations. The creature is using my expertise to become something more dangerous than just a voice thief. It's becoming a master of all human audio communication. I carry a notebook everywhere now to communicate. Luis feels guilty every time he sees me write instead of speak. But I made the right choice. My brother has his voice, his daughters have their goodnight calls, and Maria's baby hears his mother's lullabies. The only thing that terrifies me is what the creature might do with everything I taught it about sound. Last night, I heard my voice on 3 different radio stations at the same time, all broadcasting technical information about satellite communication systems. The creature isn't just stealing voices anymore, it's building a network. If you work with audio equipment, communication systems, or any kind of recording technology, be careful. The creature knows things now that it shouldn't know. Things I taught it when I traded my voice for my brother's. And if you ever hear a familiar voice calling from outside your window, don't go. No matter how much the voice sounds like someone you love, no matter what secrets it tells you to prove it's real, don't go outside. Some trades can't be undone. Some voices are too dangerous to lose. My name is Janet Torres, and I've been working as an immigration officer at Anchorage International Airport for 12 years. I started right after college with a degree in criminal justice and a heart full of hope about protecting America's borders. I've seen it all: drug smugglers hiding cocaine in baby diapers, human traffickers with fake families, and desperate people willing to risk everything for a new life. I thought I could spot any kind of deception walking through those airport doors. I was wrong. What happened on November 15, 2024, during the night shift at Terminal C, changed everything I thought I knew about the people crossing our borders. Some things that look human aren't human at all. And sometimes, the monsters aren't trying to get into our country to hurt us. Sometimes, they're invited. The night started like any other Tuesday in Alaska. Snow was falling hard outside, and the airport felt like a frozen tomb. Most flights had been delayed or canceled, but Flight 442 from Manila managed to land around 11 p.m. Only about 30 passengers stumbled off that plane, looking tired and confused after the long journey. I was working the immigration checkpoint alone that night. Budget cuts meant we were always understaffed, especially on weeknight shifts. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made everyone look like they had jaundice. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. The heating system never worked right in our section, and my fingers were stiff from the cold. I'd processed about 20 passengers when I saw them. A family of 4, mom, dad, and 2 kids. Nothing unusual about that. Families immigrate to Alaska all the time, usually for work in the oil fields or fishing industry. But something felt off from the moment they approached my station. The father, Pedro Santos, according to his paperwork, was a short, stocky man who looked like he'd spent his life doing hard work. His immigration forms listed him as a construction worker, which made sense. His hands were rough and calloused, and his shoulders had that permanent hunch that comes from years of heavy lifting. But he wouldn't look at me. Not once. Most people are nervous when they meet immigration officers. That's normal. But Pedro kept his eyes glued to the floor, like he was afraid of what I might see if he looked up. His wife, Rosa, stood behind him with their 2 children. She was listed as a seamstress, and her fingers had the tiny scars that come from years of needlework. But what caught my attention was how she kept touching her children's necks. Not in a loving, protective way. More like she was checking something, making sure something was still there or still hidden. "Purpose of your visit to the United States?" I asked Pedro in Spanish. I'd learned the language during my first year on the job. "Work," he mumbled. "Construction work in Whitmore." I looked at their documents again. Whitmore, Alaska. Population 200 on a good day. It was one of those tiny villages way up north where people went to disappear from the world. No roads in or out, just small plains and snowmobiles. "Why Whitmore?" I asked. "There are bigger towns with more construction jobs," Rosa answered before Pedro could open his mouth. "We have family there," she said quickly. Too quickly. "My cousin owns a business." I ran their names through the system while we talked. Clean records, no red flags in the computer. But my gut was telling me something different. After 12 years of this job, you learn to trust your instincts. The children worried me most. A boy and a girl, ages 8 and 10 according to their passports. They stood perfectly still behind their parents, not fidgeting or complaining like normal kids after a 14-hour flight. Their eyes were alert, scanning the airport like they were looking for threats or exits. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a roll of candy. It was a trick I'd learned early in my career. Kids always want candy, especially after being stuck on a plane for hours. I offered some to the boy. He looked at me with these dark, serious eyes and shook his head. Not politely, not shyly, just a flat refusal, like the idea disgusted him. "No, thank you," the girl said. Her voice was too mature, too controlled for a 10-year-old. I tried to shake off the strange feeling and continued with the interview. That's when I noticed Pedro's background check had some interesting details. His last address in the Philippines was in a small town called San Miguel. I'd never heard of it, but something made me dig deeper. A quick internet search while they waited revealed some disturbing news articles. 12 children had gone missing in San Miguel over the past 6 months. Local police blamed wild animals, but the bodies were never found. The Santos family had left the Philippines just 2 weeks after the last disappearance. "Mr. Santos," I said, switching back to English to see his reaction. "Can you tell me about the situation in your hometown? I'm seeing some concerning news reports." Pedro's face went completely pale. Rosa stepped forward and grabbed his arm. "We know nothing about that," she said. "We left because there was no work, that's all." But I could see sweat beading on Pedro's forehead despite the cold air. Rosa's grip on his arm was so tight her knuckles had turned white. I decided to dig deeper. "I need to examine your luggage," I said. Standard procedure for families immigrating from high-risk areas. They exchanged a look. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but in that moment, I saw something pass between them. Not words. Something older and more primitive. Like animals deciding whether to run or fight. "Of course," Pedro said finally, "we have nothing to hide." Rosa went to get their bags from the luggage carousel. While she was gone, I tried to make small talk with Pedro and the kids. That's when I noticed more strange details. Pedro kept his mouth closed when he spoke, like he was trying to hide his teeth. When he did smile, a forced, unnatural expression, I caught a glimpse of what looked like filed points. Maybe it was just bad dental work, but something about it made my skin crawl. The children stood without moving for nearly 10 minutes. No shifting from foot to foot, no complaints about being tired. They barely seemed to breathe, and their fingernails were longer than normal for kids their age. Too long and shaped wrong somehow. Rosa returned with 3 large suitcases and a smaller carry-on bag. The suitcases were heavy, I could tell by how she struggled to move them. But the carry-on bag smelled wrong. It was a sharp, metallic smell that made my stomach turn. "What's in the small bag?" I asked. "Medicine," Rosa said quickly. "For my husband's condition." "What condition?" Pedro shot her a warning look. "Diabetes," he said. "I need special diet." I asked to see the medicine. Rosa unzipped the bag with shaking hands. Inside were several packages wrapped in plastic and aluminum foil. They were cold, like they'd been kept on ice during the flight. "Insulin needs to stay cold," Pedro explained. But when I touched one of the packages, it didn't feel like medicine bottles. It felt soft, organic, and the smell that escaped when I opened the bag made me step back. It was the smell of raw meat. Fresh raw meat. "This isn't insulin," I said. "It's special medicine," Rosa said. "From a traditional healer." I opened one of the packages. Inside was what looked like raw beef, cut into strange shapes. Some pieces looked like they might have been organs. My stomach turned, and I had to cover my nose. "You can't bring raw meat into the United States," I said. "There are strict regulations about food products." "Please," Pedro said, and for the first time, he looked directly at me. His eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, black, like looking into empty holes. I took a step back. "Sir, I need you to calm down." But something was happening to his face. His jaw looked wrong, like it was stretching or unhinging. And when he opened his mouth to speak, I saw that his tongue was too long and split at the tip like a snake's. "We need that medicine," he said, and his voice sounded different, deeper, with a clicking sound underneath the words. Rosa was making that clicking sound too, with her tongue against her teeth. It reminded me of the sounds lizards make, or insects. The children had moved. They were no longer standing behind their parents, but had somehow spread out around my station without me noticing. The boy was to my left, the girl to my right. Their fingernails had grown longer, curved into points like claws. I reached for my radio to call for backup, but my hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Security to Immigration Station 3, I whispered into the radio. "I need assistance." That's when Pedro smiled. His teeth weren't just filed to points, they were wrong. Too many of them, arranged in rows like a shark's mouth. "We were invited," he said. "The village needs us." "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask. Rosa pulled out a letter from her purse. It was on official letterhead from the Whitmore Village Council. "Pest control," she said. "They have a problem with animals. We are very good at solving that kind of problem." I snatched the letter and read it quickly. It was a job offer for the Santos family to relocate to Whitmore and help with wildlife management. It mentioned their specialized skills and unique approach to predator control. The village had hired them without knowing what they really were. "You're not human," I whispered. Pedro's head tilted to one side, too far to one side. "We are what we have always been," he said. "But now we have papers. Legal papers." I tried to back away, but the children had moved closer. The girl was directly behind me now, and I could hear that clicking sound coming from her throat. "The children in your village in the Philippines?" I said. "You killed them." "We ate well there," Rosa said simply. But there were too many questions, too much attention. Here, in Alaska, villages lose children to wolves and bears all the time. No one will ask questions. The boy reached out and touched my arm. His hand was cold, and his nails dug into my skin through my uniform. "You cannot stop us," he said in perfect English. "We have done nothing wrong. We have papers." They were right. They hadn't committed any crimes on American soil. They hadn't even lied on their immigration forms. They really were a family. And Pedro really was a construction worker. The letter from Whitmore was real. My radio crackled. "Torres, what's your status? You called for assistance?" I looked at the Santos family. They were watching me with those black eyes, waiting to see what I would do. "False alarm," I said into the radio. "Everything's under control here." Because what could I tell them? That a family of shape-shifting monsters had legal immigration papers? That they'd been hired by an Alaskan village to eat children? I stamped their passports with shaking hands. "Welcome to the United States," I said. Pedro gathered their documents while Rosa repacked the raw meat. The children moved back to their positions behind their parents, looking like normal kids again. "Thank you for your service," Pedro said as they prepared to leave. "We will do good work in Alaska." "The new moon is in 3 days," Rosa added. "We must reach the village before then." They walked away toward the domestic terminal to catch their connecting flight to Whitmore. I watched them go, knowing I was sending monsters to a village full of innocent people. But I also knew no one would believe me. I tried to call the Whitmore Village Council that night. The phone rang and rang with no answer. I tried again the next day and got through to the village administrator, a man named Bill McKenzie. "Oh yeah, the Santos family," he said. "They're exactly what we need. We've had problems with wolves getting into the village, taking our kids, happened 3 times in the past year. These folks come highly recommended for dealing with predator problems." "What kind of recommendations?" I asked. "From other villages in the Philippines. They've solved similar problems there." I tried to explain what I'd seen, but Bill cut me off. "Look, lady, I don't know what your problem is, but we need help. These people are qualified, and they're willing to work for cheap. That's good enough for us." He hung up before I could say anything else. 2 days later, federal agents showed up at the airport. They said they were investigating a cultural misunderstanding involving Filipino immigrants. They asked me detailed questions about the Santos family interview, then told me the case was classified. "These people are protected by cultural and religious freedom laws," one agent explained. "Their traditional practices may seem unusual to outsiders, but they're not illegal." "Traditional practices?" I said. "They're cannibals." "That's a very serious accusation, Miss Torres. Do you have any evidence of cannibalism? Any actual crimes committed on American soil?" I didn't. All I had were black eyes, strange teeth, and a bag of raw meat. The agents left, but not before informing me that I was being transferred to the Fairbanks airport. Effective immediately. They said it was a promotion, but I knew better. 3 weeks after my transfer, I started monitoring news reports from rural Alaska. Just out of curiosity, I told myself. The first report came from a village called Tanana. 2 children missing, believed taken by wolves. Then, Galena, 1 child missing. Then, Koyukuk, Huslia, and Ruby, always children. Always blamed on wolves or bears. In 6 months, missing children cases in rural Alaska increased by 400%. The pattern was always the same: small villages, isolated locations, no witnesses. Local authorities blamed wildlife, and federal agencies showed no interest in investigating. I tried to get the case files, but they were all classified. I tried to contact other immigration officers who might have encountered similar families, but my security clearance had been revoked. The Santos family had disappeared into the Alaskan wilderness, and they were hunting. I still work for immigration services, but I'll never work another international checkpoint. They've made sure of that. My official record shows I had a psychological episode and made unfounded accusations against immigrant families. But I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere in Alaska, in villages so remote they barely exist on maps, families are losing their children to monsters that carry legal immigration papers. The worst part? I helped them get here. I stamped those passports with my own hands. Sometimes I wonder if there are others. Other families like the Santos, scattered across the world, looking for new hunting grounds. Places where missing children get blamed on wild animals instead of the monsters living next door. If you work in immigration, in any country, pay attention to the families that seem too perfect, too controlled. Watch for children who don't act like children, and adults who won't make eye contact. And if you ever encounter a family carrying raw meat as medicine, traveling to isolated villages during the new moon, don't do what I did. Don't let them through. Because once you stamp that passport, once you give monsters legal status, there's no taking it back. They become someone else's problem, someone else's nightmare. The Santos family is still out. Still hunting, still legal, and I'm the one who let them in. My name is Dr. Elena Rodriguez, and I've been working for the CDC as an epidemiologist for 12 years. I study how diseases spread from person to person. I've tracked down everything from food poisoning outbreaks to bird flu cases. I've worked in some pretty scary places: refugee camps in Syria, Ebola zones in West Africa, even that anthrax scare in Miami back in 2019. My job is to find patient zero, figure out how a disease spreads, and stop it before it kills more people. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. What happened in Fairbanks, Alaska last October changed everything I thought I knew about infectious diseases. It started as a simple case. While asked, local police called us about some guy who bit his neighbor. Seemed like a rabies case, maybe PCP or bath salts. But what I found up there wasn't any drug or animal virus. It was something that should have stayed buried in the frozen ground. Something that turned people into monsters while keeping their minds perfectly clear. *** Section 2. Professional context and setup, ***. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. My supervisor, Dr. Martinez, walked into my cubicle with that look, the one that meant I'd be packing a bag. "Rodriguez, how do you feel about Alaska?" he asked, dropping a file on my desk. "In October? Freezing, I'd guess." I opened the file. Photos of bite marks, hospital records, police reports. What am I looking at? Mark Thompson, 34, insurance salesman. Last Friday night, he attacked his neighbor with his teeth. Bit off 3 fingers before they could pull him away. Local hospital thinks it's rabies, but the blood work is all wrong. I studied the photos. The bite patterns were human, but the damage was extensive. Like the guy had shark teeth. Where's Thompson now? Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, sedated and restrained. But here's the weird part. His wife says he's been acting strange for about a week. Stopped eating regular food completely. Just raw meat from the butcher shop. I'd seen drug-induced psychosis before, but this felt different. The systematic way he'd attacked. The focused aggression. I think it reminded me more of a predator than a sick person. The flight to Fairbanks took 6 hours. I spent most of it reading medical reports and police interviews. Thompson had no history of mental illness, no drug use, no recent travel outside Alaska. He worked a boring office job, coached Little League on weekends, went to church every Sunday. Normal guy. The only unusual thing? 2 weeks before the attack, he'd gone hiking alone in the Chena River area. His GPS tracker showed he'd wandered off the main trail for about 4 hours. When search and rescue found him, he claimed he'd gotten lost following weird sounds deeper into the woods. That should have been my first warning sign. Fairbanks in October is already frozen solid. The hospital sat in the middle of town like a concrete block, surrounded by parking lots covered in dirty snow. Inside, the heating system made everything smell like dry air and disinfectant. Dr. Sarah Kim, the attending physician, met me at the nurses' station. She looked exhausted. "Thank God the CDC sent someone," she said, shaking my hand. "This case is driving us crazy. His blood work shows massive metabolic changes, but we can't figure out what's causing them." She led me down a hallway lined with patient rooms. Most were empty, small-town hospital, not much business except for the usual winter accidents. "Thompson's metabolism is running about 5 times normal speed," Dr. Kim explained as we walked. "His body temperature is up 2 degrees, heart rate consistently over 120, but he shows no signs of fever or infection. And the hunger. He keeps asking for meat, raw meat." We stopped outside room 247. Through the reinforced glass window, I could see Mark Thompson lying on a hospital bed, his wrists and ankles secured with leather restraints. He looked ordinary. Brown hair, medium build, the kind of guy you'd see selling insurance in any small town. But when he turned to look at us, his eyes were different, focused in a way that made my skin crawl, like he was calculating something. ***, Section 3. First anomaly ***, can I talk to him? I asked Dr. Kim. "I'll be right outside. He's been cooperative, but there's something off about the way he talks now." I entered the room slowly, keeping my distance from the bed. Thompson turned his head to follow my movement, never blinking. "Mr. Thompson? I'm Dr. Rodriguez from the CDC. I'd like to ask you some questions about what happened." "The hunger started small," he said immediately, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. His voice was calm, normal. "About a week ago. First, regular food just tasted wrong, like cardboard. Then it started tasting bad, like it was rotting in my mouth." I pulled out my tablet and started taking notes. "When did you first crave meat?" "Day 3. Went to the butcher shop and bought 2 pounds of ground beef. Ate it raw in my car." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "You smell healthy. Good circulation." The comment made me step back toward the door. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask about your hiking trip. The one 2 weeks ago." Something changed in his expression. Not fear or confusion, it's not more like hunger. "I heard them calling," he said, "deep in the woods, past where the trail ends. Voices speaking a language I didn't understand, but somehow I knew what they meant. They were hungry too." "Who was calling you?" "The first ones. The ones who got hungry long before I did." He tested the restraints around his wrists, not struggling, just checking. "They showed me what it was like to really need something. Not want it, need it. Like drowning and needing air. I documented everything, but my hands were starting to shake. The way he talked about it, so matter of fact, like describing his morning routine. The neighbor you attacked, Mr. Thompson. Can you tell me why?" Jerry was walking his dog past my house. I could smell his blood from 50 feet away. Type A, positive, slight iron deficiency, recent cut on his left hand that was already healing. Thompson smiled, and I noticed his teeth looked sharper than they should. I needed what he had inside him. That's when I knew this wasn't drugs or mental illness. People on PCP don't track blood types by smell. I left the room and found Dr. Kim waiting in the hallway, looking as unsettled as I felt. "Has anyone run tests on his saliva?" I asked. "Standard toxicology screen, nothing unusual. I need a full protein analysis, and I want to know exactly where he went hiking. GPS coordinates, topographic maps, everything." Dr. Kim frowned. "You think he caught something out there?" "I think something caught him." That afternoon, I drove out to the Chena River Recreation Area with a local park ranger named Mike Torres. The trail Thompson had followed was popular with day hikers, well-marked, relatively safe, nothing unusual. Until we reached the point where his GPS showed he'd left the main path. "This is where it gets weird," Mike said, checking his own GPS unit. "According to the data you showed me, Thompson walked straight into some of the densest forest in the area. No trails, no landmarks, just trees and mud. We followed Thompson's recorded path for about half a mile. The forest grew thicker, darker, and then Mike stopped. "Dr. Rodriguez, you need to see this." Ahead of us, carved into the trunk of a massive spruce tree, were symbols I didn't recognize. Not graffiti or initials, so lies, these looked old, weathered, like they'd been there for years. The cuts went deep into the bark, forming angular patterns that hurt to look at directly. But what really bothered me were the bones scattered around the base of the tree. Animal bones, I told myself, had to be. Deer, maybe bears. But when I knelt down to examine them closer, I found something that made my blood run cold. A human jawbone. Adult male, based on the size. And the teeth had been filed to points. *** section 4, escalating wrongness, ***. Back at the hospital, I immediately called my supervisor in Atlanta. Martinez, I need a full forensic anthropology team up here, plus a hazmat unit. This isn't a simple infection. Slow down, Rodriguez. What did you find? I told him about the bones, the carved symbols, Thompson's impossible ability to smell blood types. As I talked, I watched through the window as Thompson lay motionless on his bed, staring at the ceiling. I'm uploading the saliva analysis results now, I said, pulling up the lab report on my tablet. The protein structures are unlike anything in our database. They're acting like prions, but they're not breaking down brain tissue. They're rebuilding it. Rebuilding it how? Enhanced sensory processing, increased metabolic efficiency, reduced empathy responses. It's like something is rewiring human brains for hunting. Through the window, I saw Thompson turn his head toward me, even though there was no way he could hear our conversation. He smiled and mouthed the word, hungry. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Elena, I'm going to run this up the chain. In the meantime, I want you to interview everyone who had contact with Thompson in the last 2 weeks. Family, co-workers, that neighbor he attacked. Already on it. I'm meeting with his wife tomorrow morning. But when I called Sarah Thompson that evening, her voice sounded different. Distracted. Mrs. Thompson? This is Dr. Rodriguez from the CDC. We spoke yesterday about scheduling an interview. Oh, yes, the interview. Long pause. I've been thinking about Mark, about what he said before it happened. What did he say? He told me the hunger was wonderful, that for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he needed. Another pause. Dr. Rodriguez, have you ever been really hungry? Not just missing a meal, but truly, desperately hungry? The question made me uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson, are you feeling all right? I'm feeling focused. Mark bit me 3 days ago, just a small bite on my hand while we were talking through the glass. The security guard didn't think it was serious. Her voice got softer, more dreamy. I didn't think it was serious either. Until this morning. My tablet slipped from my hands and clattered on the floor. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Oh, I'm already here, Dr. Rodriguez. I'm in the parking lot. I can smell you through the building walls. I ran to the window overlooking the parking lot. Sarah Thompson stood next to a blue sedan, still wearing her bank teller uniform. She waved at me. Even from 4 stories up, I could see that her teeth had grown. I immediately called hospital security, but when I looked back out the window, she was gone. Doctor! Kim! I shouted, running down the hallway. We need to evacuate the hospital, now! What? Why? Thompson infected his wife. She's in the building somewhere. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Over the intercom, a calm voice announced, "Security alert, all personnel to secure positions." But Sarah Thompson's voice came over the same intercom system a moment later. Dr. Rodriguez, I found the security office. Mr. Peterson was very helpful. He's type B negative. Did you know that's quite rare? Dr. Kim grabbed my arm. Elena, what the hell is happening? We need to get to Thompson's room. If his wife is infected, she'll try to free him. We ran through hallways, lit only by emergency bulbs. The hospital felt different now, bigger, darker, full of hiding places. Every shadow could contain something hungry. When we reached Thompson's floor, we found the nurse's station empty. Charts scattered on the floor, coffee still warm in abandoned mugs. Like everyone had just vanished. In here, doctor, Kim whispered, pointing to a supply closet. We can barricade ourselves and call for help. But when I tried my cell phone, all I got was static. The landlines were dead too. Through the window in Thompson's door, I could see his bed was empty. The leather restraints hung loose, cut through with something sharp. That's when we heard Sarah Thompson's voice from the hallway behind us. Dr. Rodriguez? I brought friends. I turned around slowly. Sarah stood at the end of the hallway with two other people, a security guard and someone in scrubs who must have been a nurse. All three had the same focused, predatory expression, and all three had teeth that looked like they belonged in a shark's mouth. The hunger is spreading, Sarah said conversationally. Each person we share it with understands immediately. No fear, no confusion, just clarity about what humans really need to survive. Doctor, Kim pressed herself against the wall next to me. Elena, the stairs. We can reach the parking garage. But Sarah shook her head. Dr. Kim, you have type AB blood. That's the universal recipient. Mark is very interested in meeting you. The three of them started walking toward us, not running, just moving with the steady pace of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to go. We ran. The hospital corridors stretched out like a maze in the emergency lighting. Every turn revealed new horrors. Empty wheelchairs with blood on the seats. Office doors standing open with no one inside. The faint sound of something wet and tearing from the cafeteria. The parking garage. Dr. Kim gasped as we reached the stairwell. My car's on level 2. We made it down one flight before we heard voices above us. Not just Sarah and her two friends, but more. A lot more. How many people work the night shift? I asked. 12, maybe 15. The voices were getting closer, and they were all talking about the same thing. Hunger, blood types. The joy of finally understanding what they really needed. Level 2 was dark except for the exit signs. Cars sat in neat rows like sleeping animals. Dr. Kim's Honda was parked near the back wall. We were halfway to the car when we realized we weren't alone. Mark Thompson stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. His hospital gown was torn and bloody, and his fingernails had grown into claws. Dr. Rodriguez, he said pleasantly. Thank you for coming to Fairbanks. You've been very helpful in our research. Research? We're learning how the hunger spreads most efficiently. Hospitals are excellent environments, lots of healthy people in a confined space, limited security, medical equipment to keep subjects alive during the transition. Behind him, more infected emerged from the shadows. Hospital staff, patients, visitors, AIMA, maybe 20 people total, all with the same shark teeth and calculating expressions. You see, Thompson continued, the first ones who spoke to me in the forest, they've been waiting for someone like me. Someone who could bring the hunger to places with many people. They're very old, Dr. Rodriguez. They remember when humans were prey animals before we got too clever for our own good. Doctor, Kim whispered. Elena? The fire alarm. She was right. A fire alarm pull station hung on the wall about 10 feet away. If we could trigger it, maybe the fire department would respond before these things spread beyond the hospital. The hunger isn't a disease, Thompson said, moving closer. It's evolution. Humans were never meant to eat plants and processed food. We were meant to hunt, to feed on our own kind. The first ones just helped us remember. I lunged for the fire alarm and pulled it as hard as I could. Sirens began blaring throughout the building. Strobe lights flashed. The infected didn't seem bothered by the noise. If anything, they looked pleased. Excellent, Thompson said. When the fire department arrives, we'll have fresh subjects. Firefighters tend to be type O, very nutritious. That's when I realized we weren't going to escape. Not tonight. ***, Section 5. Climactic encounter. ***, the infected surrounded us in a loose circle, but they weren't attacking. Not yet. Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah Thompson said, stepping forward. Mark wants to offer you a choice. You're clearly intelligent, and your medical knowledge would be valuable to our community. Community? We're not mindless monsters. We retain all our human intelligence and memories. We just have clarity now about what humans really need to survive. She smiled, and her pointed teeth gleamed in the emergency lighting. The hunger gives us focus, purpose. No more wondering what we want from life. Through the concrete walls, I could hear fire trucks arriving outside, voices shouting orders, heavy boots on pavement, but I knew they'd just become more victims. The choice is simple, Mark Thompson said. Join us willingly, and the transition will be easier. Fight us, and we'll have to be more direct. Dr. Kim grabbed my arm. Elena, my medical bag, in the car. I have sedatives. She was right. If we could dose ourselves with enough barbiturates, Maybe we'd die before the infection could take hold. Better than becoming hunters. But before I could answer, one of the infected, a young nurse, tilted her head like she was listening to something. "More are coming," she said. "Not firefighters. Military vehicles." Thompson frowned. "That's not possible. We've only been active for a few hours." The nurse pressed her ear against the concrete wall. "Helicopter engines, multiple vehicles. Someone called for help before we took the communication systems." I felt a surge of hope. Maybe Martinez had been monitoring my calls. Maybe the CDC had protocols for situations like this. "It doesn't matter," Sarah said. "We'll adapt. The hunger always finds a way to spread." But Thompson looked less confident. "How long before they arrive?" 5 minutes, maybe less. That's when I made my decision. If military units were coming, I needed to get them information about what they were facing. These weren't zombies or rabid animals. They were intelligent predators who could plan and coordinate. "I'll make your choice easier," I said, pulling out my tablet. "I'm going to document everything I've learned about your infection. The symptoms, the transmission method, the behavioral changes. Maybe someone will figure out how to stop it." Thompson laughed. "Dr. Rodriguez, you're still thinking like the old kind of human. Stopping us isn't the goal anymore. Joining us is." But I was already typing, recording everything I could remember about the protein analysis, the carved symbols in the forest, the systematic way the infection spread through the hospital. The infected watched me work, amused rather than concerned. They had all the time in the world until the building shook. Explosions echoed from above us, not random blasts but controlled demolitions. Someone was sealing the exits. "Quarantine protocol," I whispered. "They're not here to rescue anyone. They're here to contain the outbreak." The infected looked at each other with something that might have been worry. For the first time, their predatory confidence wavered. More explosions. The parking garage lights flickered and went out completely, leaving us in total darkness except for the glow from my tablet screen. In the distance, I could hear helicopter rotors getting closer. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Thompson's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. "Your government friends are about to kill everyone in this building, infected and uninfected alike. Is that really the outcome you wanted?" He was right. Quarantine protocol meant no survivors, no witnesses, no evidence. Everyone inside the building would be classified as potentially infected and eliminated. But as I thought about it, I realized that might be the only way to stop this thing from spreading beyond Fairbanks. "Yes," I said. "It's exactly the outcome I wanted." The helicopters were directly overhead now. I could hear rappelling equipment, boots hitting the roof. "Elena, doctor," Kim whispered beside me. "If they're using quarantine protocol, they'll gas the building first. We have maybe 2 minutes before the air becomes toxic." Around us in the darkness, the infected were moving. Not toward us, but toward what sounded like maintenance tunnels and service corridors. They were looking for ways out. But I heard Thompson's voice one more time, very close to my ear. "Dr. Rodriguez, there's something you should know. When you examined the bite mark on my wife's hand 3 hours ago, you touched the wound without gloves. The proteins are absorbed through skin contact." My blood went cold. "You're lying. Check your fingernails, doctor." I looked down at my hands in the glow from my tablet. My fingernails were longer than they'd been that morning, sharper, and I was starting to feel very, very hungry. Section 6. Resolution and aftermath. The gas came down through the ventilation system like a gray fog. "Doctor." Kim collapsed first, then most of the infected. I held my breath as long as I could, trying to finish my documentation. But the hunger was growing stronger by the minute. Thompson had been right. I'd been infected hours ago without realizing it. My body temperature was rising, my heart rate increasing, and the smell of Dr. Kim's blood was becoming overwhelmingly attractive. I managed to upload my research files to the CDC database before the tablet slipped from my hands. Somewhere in Atlanta, other epidemiologists would study what I'd learned. Maybe they'd find a way to identify carriers before the hunger took complete control. The military teams found me unconscious in the parking garage 12 hours later. According to the official report, I was the sole survivor of a rabies outbreak that killed 43 people at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. They kept me in isolation for 2 weeks, running every test imaginable. My blood work showed elevated metabolism and protein abnormalities, but nothing that couldn't be explained by trauma and stress. The physical changes, the slightly sharper teeth, the enhanced senses, were subtle enough to pass medical examination. I convinced them I was clean. I returned to work in Atlanta 3 weeks later. My colleagues treated me like a hero, the CDC researcher who survived a deadly outbreak and provided crucial data for future prevention efforts. I received a commendation, a raise, and assignment to a prestigious research facility. But late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I think about what Thompson told me in the darkness, about the hunger being wonderful, about finally knowing exactly what you need. I still eat regular food, go to restaurants with friends, maintain my normal routine. But sometimes, when I'm walking through downtown Atlanta and smell someone bleeding from a small cut, or when I'm working late at the lab and a colleague gets a paper cut, the hunger whispers to me, tells me how easy it would be, how much better I'd feel, how much clearer everything would become. I've been documenting my symptoms in a private journal, tracking the progression of the infection in my own body. The protein levels in my saliva are increasing weekly. My canine teeth have grown 2 millimeters longer. My sense of smell can distinguish blood types from 30 feet away. Most concerning of all, I've started to understand what Thompson meant about clarity. The confused, anxious person I used to be is fading away, replaced by someone with very specific, very focused needs. Last week, I recommended 3 of my colleagues for transfer to field research positions in remote areas. Rural hospitals, isolated communities, places where a small outbreak could spread quickly before anyone noticed. They were excited about the opportunities. Good career moves, I told them. Chances to make a real difference. I gave each of them a farewell handshake. Firm grip, just long enough for skin contact. The hunger is patient. It can wait for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. And there are so many hospitals out there, so many places where healthy people gather in confined spaces. My name is Dr. Elena Rodriguez, and I've been working for the CDC for 12 years. I study how diseases spread from person to person, and I'm very good at my job. My name is Lisa Park, and I've been a newspaper reporter for 12 years. I started at small papers in Oregon, worked my way up to crime beat in Seattle, and covered everything from city council meetings to murder trials. I've interviewed drug dealers, corrupt politicians, and families of missing persons. I thought I'd seen every kind of human darkness there was. But what happened last winter in Barrow, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about what it means to be human. I should have known something was wrong when the assignment came in. My editor at the Pacific Northwest Herald called me into his office on a Tuesday morning in November. "I've got something weird for you, Park," he said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. "Small town story, but the numbers don't add up." The folder contained census data for Barrow, Alaska. Population listed at 4,000 residents. But there was a note clipped to the front from a federal census worker named Janet Mills. She'd written in red ink, "Counted 6,000 people during 3 separate visits. Something's not right here." "Could be a counting error," I said, flipping through the pages. "That's what I thought too, until I got this." He handed me another paper. It was a property tax dispute. 3 different families, all named Johnson, all claiming to own the same house on Whalebone Avenue. I looked up at him. Identity theft? Maybe, or maybe something else. Pack warm clothes, Park. You're going to Alaska. The flight to Barrow took 2 connections and 8 hours. I landed on a Tuesday afternoon when the sun was already setting, even though it was only 3 o'clock. Snow covered everything, the runway, the small terminal, the handful of buildings I could see from the plane window. The cold hit me like a punch when I stepped outside. -20 degrees, the pilot had announced. I'd never felt cold like that before. I rented a car and drove into town. Barrow wasn't big, just a few. Main streets lined with houses and small businesses. Most of the buildings looked the same. Dark wood siding, small windows, steep roofs to handle the snow. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. I'd booked a room at the only hotel in town, a 2-story building called the Arctic Inn. The desk clerk was a middle-aged woman with brown hair and a wide smile. "Welcome to Barrow," she said in a cheerful voice. "First time here?" "Yes, I'm Lisa Park. I have a reservation." Of course. Room 12. Will you be staying long? A few days. I'm a reporter, actually, working on a story about the town. Her smile never changed, but something flickered in her eyes. How nice. What kind of story? Just general interest, small town life, that sort of thing. She handed me the key. Well, you'll find we're a very normal community here. Very peaceful, very ordinary. The way she said ordinary made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say why. My room was small but clean. I unpacked my laptop and recorder, then sat on the bed to plan my approach. I'd start with the property dispute, try to talk to the 3 Johnson families. Then I'd look into the census discrepancy. Simple, straightforward reporting. I called the first Johnson family from the phone book. A woman answered on the second ring. Hello? Hi, this is Lisa Park from the Pacific Northwest Herald. I'm doing a story about Barrow, and I was hoping to speak with you about a property matter. Oh yes, of course. Mary Johnson speaking. Would you like to come over? We're at 247 Whalebone Avenue. That would be great. How about tomorrow morning? Perfect. 10 o'clock? See you then. I hung up and called the second Johnson family. Again, a woman answered. Hello? Hi, this is Lisa Park from the Pacific Northwest Herald. I'm doing a story about Barrow, and I was hoping to speak with you about a property matter. Oh yes, of course. Mary Johnson speaking. Would you like to come over? We're at 247 Whalebone Avenue. The words were exactly the same. Same tone, same timing, even the same little pause before of course. I hung up without responding. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I dialed the same number twice by mistake. I checked my notes and tried the third Johnson family. Hello? Hi, this is Lisa Park from... Oh yes, of course. Mary Johnson speaking. Would you like to come over? We're at 247 Whalebone Avenue. I set the phone down with shaking hands. The next morning, I drove to Whalebone Avenue. It was a short street with about 12 houses, all looking nearly identical except for their paint colors. Number 247 was a blue house in the middle of the block. I parked and walked to the front door. A woman answered my knock. Brown hair, medium height, same wide smile I'd seen at the hotel desk clerk. But this wasn't the same woman. This one was younger, maybe 35. You must be Lisa. I'm Mary Johnson. Please come in. The house was neat and clean. Family photos lined the mantel. Mary, a man who must be her husband, and 2 children. Normal family stuff. Can I get you coffee? Mary asked. That would be nice, thank you. She disappeared into the kitchen. I looked around the living room. Everything seemed normal, but something felt off. The furniture was perfectly arranged. No dust anywhere, no clutter. It looked like a showroom. Mary returned with 2 mugs of coffee. So, you're doing a story about our town? Yes, actually about a property dispute. The records show 3 families with your name claiming to own this house. Mary's smile never changed. I'm not sure what you mean. We've lived here for 5 years. My husband works at the post office. I teach at the elementary school. What grade do you teach? 3rd grade. What's your favorite part about teaching? Children are the future. Education builds strong minds. It's important to nurture young people. The answer sounded like it came from a textbook. No personal touches, no specific stories about her students. Do you have any favorite students? Kids who really stand out? All children are special in their own way. Each student deserves equal attention and care. Another textbook answer. I tried a different approach. Your children in the photos, what are their names? Tommy and Sarah. They're wonderful kids. Very well behaved. How old are they? Tommy is 8 and Sarah is 6. What are their favorite foods? They like healthy meals, vegetables and fruits. Proper nutrition is important for growing children. I'd interviewed hundreds of parents for stories over the years. Not one of them had ever answered that way. Real parents would say pizza or chicken nuggets or ice cream. They'd tell funny stories about their kids being picky eaters. I finished my coffee and thanked Mary for her time. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something else strange. The other houses on the street all had the same car parked in their driveways. Same make, same model, same blue color. Different license plates, but otherwise identical. I drove to the elementary school and asked to speak with the principal. She was a friendly woman named Carol Stevens, who seemed more normal than Mary Johnson. I'm writing about education in small Alaskan towns, I told her. Could I get some information about your school? Of course. We have about 200 students, kindergarten through 6th grade. That's a lot for a town this size. Yes, we've had some population growth recently. Lots of young families moving in. I just interviewed Mary Johnson. She said she teaches 3rd grade here. Carol looked confused. I don't have a Mary Johnson on my staff. Are you sure you have the right school? She specifically said she teaches 3rd grade at the elementary school. I'm sorry, but there's no one by that name working here, and I know all my teachers personally. I thanked Carol and left, my mind racing. Why would Mary lie about her job? And why did the principal seem so much more normal than Mary? I spent the rest of the day driving around town, observing. The more I looked, the more wrong things seemed. Too many people wore identical clothes, the same brand of jeans, the same style of winter coats. Families walking together moved in perfect sync, like they were marching, and everyone had that same wide smile. That evening, I went to the town's small diner for dinner. The waitress was another woman with brown hair and that familiar smile. What can I get you? She asked. Just a burger and fries. Excellent choice. Protein and carbohydrates provide essential energy. Again, with the textbook responses. I watched her as she worked. Her movements were precise, efficient, but somehow mechanical, like she was following a script. Other customers filled the diner, all families with children. I listened to their conversations. Every family was discussing the same topics: the weather, work, school. The exact same conversations, in the exact same words. The snow is heavy this winter, one father said. Yes, seasonal weather patterns are important for the local ecosystem, his wife replied. Snow days mean no school, their child added. Education should continue regardless of weather conditions, the mother said. At another table, a different family was having the identical conversation, word for word. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I needed evidence of this. Back at the hotel, I uploaded the audio to my laptop and listened again. The conversations were exactly the same, right down to the pauses and inflections. I called my editor. Park, how's the story going? Something's very wrong here. I think the whole town is involved in some kind of, I don't know what to call it, mass deception? What do you mean? I told him about the repeated conversations, the textbook answers, the lies about jobs. He listened quietly. Could be some kind of cult, he said finally. Religious groups sometimes coach their members to respond to outsiders in specific ways. Maybe. But it feels bigger than that. I'm going to stay a few more days, dig deeper. Be careful, Park. If you're right about something being wrong, you might be in danger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the identical cars, the scripted conversations, the way everyone moved together. Around midnight, I got dressed and went for a walk. The streets were empty and quiet. Snow crunched under my feet. Most houses were dark, but as I walked past the community center, I saw lights in the basement windows. I crept closer and peered through one of the windows. The basement was full of people, maybe 50 or 60 adults and children. They were all standing in neat rows, facing forward. And they were speaking in unison. The colony grows stronger, they said together. Unity brings survival. Individual thoughts create chaos. I fumbled for my phone and started recording through the window. The sound was muffled, but I could make out their words. We are one mind in many bodies. We preserve the useful forms. We discard the unnecessary memories. One of the people in the front row turned around. It was Mary Johnson, but her face looked different. Her smile was gone, replaced by a blank expression. Her eyes were completely black. As I watched, her face began to change. The features shifted and flowed like melting wax. For a moment, she looked like the hotel desk clerk, then like the diner waitress, then like someone else entirely. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the ground with a loud crack. Everyone in the basement turned toward the window at the same time. Dozens of black eyes staring, right at me. I ran. I sprinted back to the hotel, burst through the front door, and headed for the stairs. The desk clerk looked up from her paperwork. "Working late, Miss Park?" she asked in that same cheerful voice. I didn't answer. I locked myself in my room and immediately called my editor. "Something's here," I whispered into the phone. Something that can change how it looks. The whole town is infected or replaced or something. Park, you're not making sense. I saw it change faces, right in front of me, and they were all talking together, like a hive mind. Are you sure you weren't dreaming? You've been under a lot of stress. The line went dead. I looked at my phone. No signal. I tried my laptop. The internet connection was gone too. I was completely cut off. A soft knock came at my door. Miss Park? It was the desk clerk's voice. Is everything all right? We heard you come in rather quickly. I didn't answer. Miss Park, we just want to make sure you're comfortable. Please open the door. The voice was different now. Flatter. Less human. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. Footsteps in the hallway, but too many of them. Like a crowd of people standing outside my room. We know you saw us, the voice said. It wasn't the desk clerk anymore. It was multiple voices speaking together. We know what you recorded. I grabbed my things and went to the window. My room was on the second floor, but there was a fire escape. I climbed out into the freezing night air. The street below was full of people. Men, women, children, all standing motionless in the snow, all looking up at my window, all with those black eyes. I climbed down the fire escape as quietly as I could, but they saw me. They didn't run or shout, they just walked toward me, moving together like a single organism. I ran to my car and fumbled with the keys. The engine started, and I drove as fast as I dared on the icy roads, heading for the airport. But when I got there, the runway was blocked. More people, standing in neat rows across the tarmac. The same black eyes, the same blank expressions. I turned around and drove back into town, trying to think. There had to be someone normal here, someone real. The principal at the school had seemed different. Maybe there were others. I parked behind an abandoned building on the edge of town and tried to figure out my next move. That's when I heard the voice. In here. An old man was crouched in the doorway of the building. He looked terrified. You're the reporter, he said. I saw you talking to them. Who are you? Bill Morrison. I've lived here my whole life, 73 years. His voice shook. I watched them come. I watched them take everyone. What are they? I don't know. They showed up about 2 years ago, started with the Henderson family, replaced them overnight, then the Nakamuras. Then more and more families, until there were hardly any real people left. How did you survive? I live out here, away from town. They don't seem to notice me as long as I stay hidden. He grabbed my arm. But they know about you now. You saw too much. The census worker who reported the population discrepancy. What happened to her? Bill's face went pale. Janet Mills, she's one of them now, has been for months. We heard voices outside. That same flat, inhuman sound of many people speaking as one. She is here, the recorder of information, the spreader of truth. She must join or be preserved. What does that mean? I whispered. Bill pointed to a basement door I hadn't noticed. Down there, they keep the bodies of the real people, like specimens. The voices were getting closer. Bill motioned for me to follow him deeper into the building. We climbed to the second floor and hid in what used to be an office. There might be a way to stop them, Bill whispered. I've been watching, studying them. They can copy everything, faces, voices, mannerisms, but they can't handle strong emotions, real pain, real love, real fear. It confuses them. What do you mean? They short-circuit. Their forms start to break down when they're exposed to genuine human feelings. Not the fake emotions they pretend to have, but the real thing. The voices were in the building now, searching room by room. How do we use that? Tell them something that hurts. Something personal and real. Make them feel what you feel. They found us a few minutes later. The stairway filled with people. The Mary Johnson I'd interviewed, the desk clerk, the waitress, dozens of others. But their faces were wrong now. Features blended together, shifting constantly. One of them stepped forward. When it spoke, the voice came from all of them at once. You have seen our true nature. You have recorded our words. You cannot leave with this knowledge. You have two choices, another one said. Join our collective consciousness and become part of our survival, or become a preservation specimen for our study. I thought about what Bill had said, strong emotions, real feelings. I had a sister, I said loudly. Her name was Emma. She died when I was 16. The creatures tilted their heads, listening. She was hit by a drunk driver on her way home from school. I was supposed to pick her up that day, but I was at a friend's house instead. I chose to hang out with my friends rather than give my sister a ride. Their faces began to flicker more rapidly, like bad TV reception. I found her in the hospital, machines keeping her breathing, tubes and wires everywhere. She looked so small. My voice broke. The pain was real, even after all these years. She died holding my hand, and the last thing she said was, "It's not your fault, Lisa." The creature started making a noise I'd never heard before. A low, electronic whine, like feedback from a microphone. But it was my fault, I continued, tears streaming down my face. I should have been there. I should have protected her. I became a reporter because I wanted to find the truth, to tell stories that mattered. Because I couldn't save Emma, but maybe I could save someone else by telling their story. The whining grew louder. The creature's forms began to collapse, melting and reshaping rapidly. Their black eyes flickered between black and normal human colors. "I miss her every day," I said. "I miss her laugh, her terrible jokes, the way she always stole my sweaters. I miss fighting with her about stupid things. I miss having a future with her in it." The creatures screamed, a sound like tearing metal. Their human disguises fell away completely, revealing what they really were. They looked like enormous slugs, gray and glistening, but with human faces embedded in their flesh. Dozens of faces on each creature, the real people they'd consumed and copied. The faces were moving, trying to speak. "Help us," one of the faces whispered. Still, trapped inside. The creatures writhed and twisted, unable to maintain their forms. One by one, they began to dissolve into puddles of gray slime. Bill grabbed my hand. "Come on, while they're weakened." We ran from the building. Behind us, more of the creatures were emerging from houses throughout the town, but they were all struggling to hold their shapes. The emotional overload was spreading through their collective consciousness like a virus. We made it to my car and drove straight to the airport. The creatures on the runway had collapsed into formless heaps. I started the plane. I'd taken flying lessons years ago, and we took off into the Arctic night. I filed my story as soon as we reached Anchorage. But when I tried to submit it, my editor called me into his office. "Park, this is. Well, it's unbelievable. Everything I wrote is true. Maybe, but we can't print it. No one would believe it, and we'd lose all credibility. What about the census discrepancy? The property disputes? Those are documented facts. We'll run a small piece about administrative errors in remote locations. Nothing about shape-shifting aliens." I quit the next day, but I kept investigating on my own. What I found terrified me more than anything that happened in Barrow. There are 12 other towns in Alaska with similar census discrepancies. Populations that don't match the head count. Property disputes involving multiple families with identical names. Small communities where everyone seems just a little too perfect, a little too coordinated. The things I saw in Barrow weren't unique. They were part of something bigger. A slow invasion, one small town at a time. I don't work for newspapers anymore. I run a blog that 7 people read, documenting these anomalies. I know how it sounds, like conspiracy theories and fantasy stories, but I also know what I saw. Sometimes I wonder if they've found other ways to spread. Different methods than replacing entire towns. What if they've learned to be more subtle? What if they're among us in cities, in governments, in media companies? What if the reason no one believes stories like mine isn't just because they sound impossible? What if it's because the things that decide what gets believed and what gets dismissed aren't entirely human anymore? I still miss Emma every day, but now I'm grateful for that pain. It's proof that I'm still real, still human, still myself. And in a world where copying humanity has become so easy, being genuinely human might be the only defense we have left. If you ever find yourself in a small town where everyone seems a little too perfect, where conversations sound rehearsed, where people move in unnatural harmony, Emma's story. Remember Emma's story. Remember what real pain feels like. Remember what makes you human. And whatever you do, don't let them make you forget.